All right. Well, I had lived in that location there where the interstate goes under Limecone Lane for much of my life, and I moved away from that location in 1964. So this was about a decade after I had lived there. And when I was responding as a volunteer firefighter from the Harris Creek Station at Limecone Lane and Upper River Road, of course I passed that location, and as I approached the area where the tornado had struck, one of the first things I noticed was debris all over the road from hail that had knocked, the new leaves had just come out on the tree a couple of weeks early, unusually early, and the hailstones had knocked all the new leaves off of the tree, so the road was littered with this debris from the hail. And as I got up to the bridge over Interstate 71, I looked down into the interstate below, and I noticed that there were overturned semi-trailer trucks and cars and trucks everywhere in the ditch, and some overturned. And obviously the tornado had affected that stretch of interstate highway. And I proceeded another, half a city block, I guess, to the vicinity of Glenwood Road, which was my designated target area. And the road was thereafter impassable. And as I parked my car on the side of the road, then I got out and walked up to the point where things were pretty much impassable except on foot. And there was another firefighter there that I had not ever met before from another agency, and he had come in from US 42 and had told me later he had really endured quite an ordeal just getting through the debris to the assigned scene. And we were to be a team who would go through the Glenwood Road area east of Limecone Lane. It's about one large city block long, and search for victims and shut off utilities, especially natural gas. And I was quite familiar with that area from my youth when it was my family's farm, and that was our potato field. And at the end of Glenwood Road was the house I had lived in my very early years, a white two-story brick house that still remains. And anyway, I got there and met this other gentleman, and we proceeded to go door to door, which was really more a pile of rubble to pile of rubble. The road was very difficult to traverse even on foot, and the actual roadway was almost totally obscured by debris. We shut off gas meters. That was our primary goal, was to search for people and to shut off gas before we had a major problem. And we shut off gas meters, and we didn't find any victims till I got about mid-block. And then I heard a woman screaming and yelling for help. And she was only a few hundred feet away, but it took a couple of minutes just to get through the debris to see what was going on. And there was a gentleman lying motionless on the ground, but really was in the middle of the road, but it was covered with debris. And she said that he had just lost consciousness and collapsed. And so, of course, our first priority then was to provide first aid. And so while I was assessing the patient, feeling for a pulse and seeing if there was any respiration, I found neither. He was apparently lifeless. So we began CPR, two-man CPR. I was doing compressions. He was doing ventilation. And we continued until we were becoming exhausted. And then we traded positions, and we continued some more. And the protocol in emergency CPR is that you never stop CPR once you start it until the patient is unquestionably deceased, or you're relieved by a medical professional who declares the patient deceased. And so we continued to the absolute limit of our endurance. And I mean to the point where I was about to pass out. And when we finally quit, and of course the wife was hysterical, it was a very emotional scene. We finally quit. I just sat back and sat back on my heels really in the middle of all this mess and kind of looked around to get my bearings. And that was a very emotional moment because that was where I had played as a child. And the only house left standing was the white brick house. And so after the traumatic experience there with CPR, we continued our house-to-house search, and it was getting late in the day. It was beginning to get dark, so we hurried as best we could. And well, eventually we got to the one house that was still partly standing. It had 2 rooms left, and it was the house next to the white brick house. And when we went into that house, we found 2 elderly people in the bedroom, which was pretty much intact, except the windows were all blown out. And they were lying on the bed, listening to a portable radio, listening to accounts of the storm. And they weren't particularly happy to see 2 firefighters in turnout gear come walking into their bedroom. They did not realize that that was the only room in the entire house that remained intact. And we delicately explained to them that they had to leave and that their house had been badly damaged, and they didn't want to leave, of course. And we had no means of communication, no radio, no way to call for assistance. So we talked to these people for a few minutes, and it was beginning to get dark. And finally, they consented that they would accompany us and let us help them leave the damaged area. And the gentleman insisted that he go upstairs to get something upstairs. And I told him that the second floor of his house was entirely missing. And he insisted that he had to go upstairs. So he proceeded to go up the staircase as far as it went, which is 3 or 4 stairs. And then it was nothing. And I was right there with him to keep him from falling. And after he realized the scope of the thing, and he of course became somewhat emotional, and I said, "Okay, sir, we need to go on. It's going to take a while to walk through all this mess and get you out to the road where somebody can take care of you." And so we proceeded to do that, and that was about the end of the day for me. It was completely dark by the time we got out to Limekiln Lane, where we did have an ambulance and some other resources awaiting us at that point, just in case. We had no communication with them, but they were there just in case we needed them. And just as we got out to Limekiln Lane, the batteries in my flashlight gave out. I noticed the trees were leafing out. I stopped actually for a few moments to look up at the trees and noticed that the leaves were much more developed than usual. And it was a warm day. It wasn't particularly windy where I was standing, but I noticed that the clouds overhead were moving generally to the east at a very high rate of speed. And I knew that there was conditions that were conducive to violent weather possible. So I was concerned at that moment that there might actually be severe weather. And I had advised my wife not to go to work in downtown Louisville because of the impending possible weather. And she had remained home in our apartment off of Zorn Avenue at River Road. And as the storm was approaching, she went outside to look. The power had gone off, for one thing, and she thought that was unusual. And so she was standing out and looking up. She saw something fluttering in the sky, and at first she thought it was a piece of paper or a piece of trash of some kind. And as she stood there watching, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it turned out to be a complete hip roof off of a house. And it came down with a mighty crash in the parking lot just outside the apartment and remained there for about a week until somebody could demolish it and take it away. At that point, she knew that the weather was severe.